Retaliatory Israeli airstrikes pummel the Gaza Strip, long an epicenter of the brutal conflict between Israel and Hamas. Gaza is just 41 kilometers long and 10 wide, wedged between Israel, Egypt, and the Mediterranean Sea. The small sliver of land was occupied by Egypt when Israel was created in 1948. Then came the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel taking control of Gaza and the West Bank. Israel kept a military presence in Gaza for nearly 40 years, decades of tension spurring the first and second intifadas, or Palestinian uprisings, protests, riots, and deadly attacks over the Israeli occupation. In 2005, under pressure, Israel withdrew its troops and settlers. A year later, Hamas, a militant organization, scored a shock election win, eventually taking power in Gaza. Backed by Iran and designated a terrorist group by Canada, the U.S., and others, Hamas's aim to destroy the Israeli state.
Instead of prioritizing jobs and work and education, they've prioritized building tunnels and militancy and attacks. And so I think, frankly, there's a lot of folks in Gaza, a lot of Palestinians who have needlessly suffered.
Citing security fears, Israel began to blockade Gaza after Hamas took over, to this day controlling Gaza's airspace, its shoreline, who and what can get in or out through two of its three border crossings. Aid agencies call it an open-air prison.
The vast majority of Gaza's population, of 2 million people, live in poverty. Most rely on outside food assistance. 95% of Gaza's water is undrinkable. Gaza suffers from regular power outages, massive unemployment. It's a humanitarian disaster in Gaza.
The Hamas consolidation of power and Israeli response ushered in a new era of fighting. In 2008, Israeli forces launched a 3-week military operation in Gaza, killing more than 1,300 Palestinians. The ground operation came after Palestinian militants fired more than 2,000 rockets at Israeli targets in the 2 years prior, according to the UN, along with a spate of suicide bombings in Israel. The last Israeli ground invasion into Gaza was in 2014, triggered by the kidnapping and murder of 3 Israeli teenagers in the West Bank by Hamas-linked militants. The fighting raged for weeks, major rocket barrages fired at Israel, Israeli forces invading Gaza to destroy Hamas's tunnel system. More than 1,400 Palestinians believed to be civilians were killed, the UN says, accusing both sides of possible war crimes. After Saturday's devastation, more than 800 Israelis killed, many others abducted, there's growing speculation another ground invasion is coming. All the places which Hamas is operating in, we will turn into ruins, says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I am telling Gaza's people to leave those places. But where can they go? Gaza is home to 2.3 million people, one of the most densely populated places in the world. Israel must also consider the dozens of Israeli civilians being held hostage there. Hamas now threatening to execute a hostage every time Israel hits a civilian target in Gaza without warning.
The human lives, the human trauma makes it difficult militarily, makes it very difficult diplomatically, and gives Hamas even more leverage than it has with its arsenal.
So much suffering here for decades. And what's coming after the carnage inflicted in Israel could be much deadlier.